$180 billion. That's how much American banks collected last year from a single line on your credit card statement. And here's the thing that should terrify you. They're counting on you never understanding how this actually works. I'm going to show you exactly how the minimum payment system has become the most profitable trap in consumer finance. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why your bank sends you a thank you gift every time you only pay the minimum. But first, you need to know something that the credit card industry spent millions lobbying to keep complicated. My name is Sarah Chen, and for the past 15 years, I've analyzed financial systems that extract wealth from ordinary Americans. What I'm about to reveal isn't illegal, but it's designed to be invisible. Let me start with a question. You've probably heard that carrying a credit card balance is expensive, right? Everyone knows that. But here's what nobody tells you. The entire minimum payment system was engineered, and I mean literally engineered by economists and behavioral psychologists, to maximize how long you stay in debt. Quick note before we dive in. This is educational content, not financial advice. Always consult professionals for your specific situation. But what I'm going to show you is based on publicly available documents, federal disclosures, and leaked internal memos from major banks. So let's talk about Rachel. She's not a real person, but her numbers are based on actual data from 73 million American credit card holders. Rachel has a $5,000 balance on her credit card. 18.99% APR, pretty standard. Her minimum payment? $125 per month. Now, Rachel does what the statement suggests. She pays the minimum. She's responsible. She never misses a payment. The bank loves Rachel. Look at this statement. See that minimum payment box? It looks so reasonable, doesn't it? Just $125. But watch what happens when we calculate the real cost. Same customers.
This comparison shows how a 4% minimum payment can reduce your balance faster than 2%. By paying more than the minimum, you can save significantly on interest over time.
Actual payments track with the minimums. They're not independent decisions. So banks know this. They've known this for decades. And in fact, they've spent enormous resources making sure minimum payments stay as low as possible. Because every month you pay just the minimum is another month of interest revenue. Let me give you some context on how big this is. The average American household with credit card debt carries over $7,000 in revolving balances. Multiply that across 45 million households, factor in the average APR of 19.5%, and you get to that number I mentioned at the beginning. $180 billion annually. But here's what everyone thinks is happening versus what's actually happening. Most people believe that when they pay the minimum, they're slowly paying down their debt, chipping away at it, making progress. They're not. In the first year of minimum payments on a typical balance, roughly 85% of what you pay goes to interest. Only 15% touches the principal. You're not climbing out of a hole, you're on a treadmill. And this is where the villain-victim dynamic becomes crystal clear. On one side, you have some of the largest, most sophisticated financial institutions in the world. Teams of PhDs in behavioral economics, billions in lobbying. On the other side, you have regular people trying to manage household budgets, often during financial emergencies. The system isn't designed to be fair. It's designed to be profitable. But here's what the banks and credit card companies won't tell you, and what their internal documents reveal when they're forced into the public record through lawsuits and regulatory investigations. To understand how this actually works, the mechanics of minimum payments, and why they're calculated the way they are, we need to go deeper, because the minimum payment formula isn't random. Every piece of it was designed with maximum profit extraction in mind. Let me hand this over to Marcus, who's going to break down the actual mechanism that makes this system so devastatingly effective. Thanks, Sarah. All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts of this, because once you see how minimum payments are actually calculated, you'll realize this isn't an accident, it's a system. First, let's talk about the minimum payment formula itself. Most people have never actually looked at how their bank calculates this number. It's usually buried on page 7 of your cardholder agreement in 8-point font. But here's the standard formula that most major banks use. Your minimum payment is typically the greater of either $25 to $35 or 1 to 3% of your statement balance, plus interest charges and fees for that month. Now, that might sound simple, but let's break down why each piece of this formula is working against you. Component number 1, the percentage of your balance. Let's say your bank uses 2%. On a $5,000 balance, that's $100. Seems reasonable, right? But here's the trick. That 2% barely exceeds your monthly interest charge. At 19% APR, you're accumulating about $79 in interest per month on a $5,000 balance. So if your minimum is $100, only $21 is actually reducing your debt. You're paying $100 but making $21 of progress. That's a 79% efficiency loss. Imagine if your car lost 79% of the gas you put in it before it even reached the engine. You'd call that broken. But for credit card payments, we call it normal. Component number 2. Interest and fees are added on top. This is critical. Let's say you have a late fee or an annual fee hit your account. Those get added to your minimum payment requirement, which means your floor payment goes up, but often not by enough to make a real dent in principal. Now, here's where it gets really sophisticated. Banks use something called marginal cost pricing in their minimum payment structures. This is an economics concept, but it basically means they've calculated the absolute minimum they can require you to pay while still appearing responsible to regulators and keeping you in debt for the maximum profitable duration. Think of it like this. If minimum payments were too low, say 0.5%, regulators would crack down because it would take 40 or 50 years to pay off balances. That's obviously predatory. If minimum payments were too high, say 10%, customers would pay off balances in just a few years, and banks would lose interest revenue. So banks landed on the sweet spot, 2 to 3%. High enough to avoid regulatory scrutiny, low enough to maximize interest extraction over decades. And this wasn't guesswork. Banks ran computer simulations with millions of data points to optimize this number. I'm not speculating. This came out in congressional testimony from bank executives in the early 2000s. Watch how your $100 payment gets divided. The vast majority flows straight to interest. Only a tiny sliver touches your actual debt. This is why minimum payments feel like you're getting nowhere, because mathematically, you aren't. Look at this.
Bank profits from credit card interest show a clear spike in 2011, driven by revenue from minimum payments.
That's when minimum payment optimization strategies were fully implemented across the industry. Billions in additional profit, extracted from people who thought they were being responsible. Now, you might be asking, if this is so profitable for banks, why don't they just come out and say it? Why the complicated formulas and the tiny print? Here's the answer. And it's the most shocking part of this entire system. Because it's perfectly legal, but it would be political suicide to defend it openly. I'll explain that in just a moment. But first, you need to see the evidence of how widespread this is. According to Federal Reserve data published in 2023, the total outstanding credit card debt in the United States hit $1.3 trillion. That's trillion with a T. Of that, approximately $650 billion is revolving debt, meaning debt that carries over month to month. Now, the average APR on credit cards in 2024 was 20.4%. Do the math. Banks are collecting approximately $133 billion per year just in interest on revolving balances. Add in late fees, over-limit fees, annual fees, and other charges, and you push past $180 billion in total revenue from credit card debt. That's more than the entire GDP of Hungary, from credit card interest and fees, in 1 year, in one country. Let me walk you through the timeline of how we got here, because minimum payments weren't always calculated this way. In the 1980s, minimum payments were typically 5% of the balance. At 5%, you'd pay off a balance in just a few years, even at high interest rates. But banks lobbied hard through the 1990s to reduce regulatory requirements around minimum payment calculations. By the early 2000s, minimum payments had dropped to an average of 2.5%, then 2%. Some banks experimented with 1% minimums on certain accounts. The justification? Banks argued that lower minimum payments gave consumers flexibility during financial hardship. And technically that's true. If you're in a cash crunch, a lower minimum payment gives you breathing room. But here's what the banks didn't say. They ran computer simulations showing that lower minimums would trap more customers in long-term debt cycles and generate billions in additional interest revenue. This information came out during congressional hearings in 2009 when Elizabeth Warren, then a Harvard professor, grilled bank executives on their minimum payment strategies. Watch the correlation. As minimum payments dropped, profits exploded. This wasn't an accident, it was strategic. Now let me tell you about actual people affected by this. I can't use real names for legal reasons, but these are real cases from court filings and financial counseling records. Case Study 1. A single mother working 2 jobs accumulated $8,000 in credit card debt after her car broke down and she needed repairs to get to work. She made her minimum payments religiously for 7 years, never missed one. At the end of 7 years, her balance was $7,200. She had paid over $12,000 and barely made a dent. Case Study 2. A military veteran on a fixed income charged $5,000 for medical expenses not covered by the VA. 15 years of minimum payments later, he'd paid over $13,000 and still owed $2,800. He eventually had to file for bankruptcy. Case Study 3. A recent college graduate with $18,000 in credit card debt from living expenses during school. Paying minimums, projected payoff time, 34 years. She'd be almost 60 years old before she was debt-free, having paid over $48,000 on $18,000 of debt. These aren't edge cases. According to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, approximately 12 million Americans are in what they call persistent debt, meaning they've been making payments on credit card balances for more than 2 years, while the balance stays largely the same or even grows. 12 million people, stuck on the treadmill. Many of them paying the minimum because that's what they can afford, not realizing that the minimum is specifically designed to keep them trapped. And here's the truly infuriating part. Banks have the data to know who these people are. They can see who's been paying minimums for years. They could, theoretically, reach out and say, "Hey, you're in a debt trap. Here's how to get out." But they don't, because those customers are the profit center. So we've seen the mechanism. We've seen the evidence. Now the question is, what does this actually mean for you? How does this system affect your life, your future, your ability to build wealth? Because it's not just about the money you're paying in interest. It's about the opportunity cost, what you could have done with that money if it wasn't going to banks. Let me bring in David to break down the real-world implications of this system and why it's about so much more than just credit card bills. Thanks, Jennifer. I'm David Morrison, and I've been analyzing consumer finance and wealth inequality for 23 years. What I want to talk about now is something that doesn't get enough attention: the cascade effect of minimum payment debt on your entire financial life. Here's what this means for you, personally. Let's say you're carrying $7,000 in credit card debt, again, right around the national average for households with debt. And let's say you're paying the minimum, which keeps you in debt for 20+ years. That $7,000 in debt isn't just costing you the interest payments, it's costing you your financial future. Let me show you what I mean. If you're paying $175 per month in minimum payments on that $7,000 balance, that's $2,100 per year going to essentially tread water on debt. Now imagine you didn't have that debt. What could you do with $2,100 per year? Scenario 1. You could max out a Roth IRA contribution. If you did that every year for 20 years with modest 7% returns, you'd have over $90,000 in retirement savings. Tax-free. That's what the minimum payment trap is costing you, in retirement security. Scenario 2. You could save for a down payment on a house. In 20 years, that's $42,000 before any interest. That's the difference between owning a home and renting forever for many Americans. Scenario 3. You could invest in your education, your children's education, start a business, or build an emergency fund that prevents future debt. All gone, because you're servicing credit card debt instead. But it's even bigger than individual impact. Let's zoom out and look at what this means for society. $180 billion per year flowing from consumers to banks through credit card interest and fees. That's $180 billion that's not being spent in local economies, not being invested in businesses, not being saved for retirement, not being used to buy homes or cars or education. It's wealth extraction. Pure and simple. And here's who gets hit the hardest: low and moderate income households. According to research from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, Households earning under $50,000 per year are 3 times more likely to carry revolving credit card balances than households earning over $100,000. Why? Because when you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have the luxury of paying more than the minimum. You pay what you can afford. And what you can afford is exactly what the minimum payment is designed to capture. The maximum the bank can extract while keeping you solvent enough to keep paying. This isn't a personal finance failure. This is a structural economic trap that targets the people who can least afford it. Same starting point. 2 different paths. The minimum payment path leaves you with debt and no savings. The aggressive payment path leaves you debt-free with a 6-figure retirement account. The choice seems obvious, but the system is designed to make the wrong choice feel like the only choice. Now let's talk about what's coming, because this problem is getting worse, not better. Credit card debt in America has been rising steadily since the pandemic. As of late 2024, we're at record high levels. And with interest rates at 20+% and minimum payments still calculated at rock-bottom percentages, the debt trap is deepening. Here's what economists are predicting. If current trends continue, by 2030, total credit card debt could hit $2 trillion. That would mean over $250 billion per year in interest and fees flowing from American households to banks. $250 billion every single year. And the people paying that aren't billionaires. They're teachers, nurses, retail workers, veterans, retirees. Regular people trying to make ends meet. This connects to bigger questions about wealth inequality in America. Over the past 40 years, we've seen a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class to the top 1%, and credit card debt is one of the mechanisms of that transfer. Think about it. Who owns the banks? Shareholders. Who are the major shareholders? Wealthy individuals and institutional investors. Who's paying the interest? Everyone else. It's a system that concentrates wealth at the top by extracting it from the bottom and middle. And minimum payments are the engine of that extraction. They keep money flowing upward while creating the illusion of financial responsibility. You're making your payments, you're being a good customer, but you're trapped in a system designed to keep you paying forever. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying all debt is bad or that credit cards are evil. Credit cards can be useful financial tools when used responsibly. The problem is the minimum payment structure that's designed to prevent responsible use from actually getting you out of debt. So that's the grim reality. $180 billion extracted every year through a system that's designed to be invisible and inescapable. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be this way. There are actions you can take as an individual to break out of this trap. And there are policy changes that could fix this system if we had the political will to implement them. Let me hand this back to Sarah to talk about solutions, both personal and systemic, because you deserve to know how to fight back against this. Thanks, David. All right, we've covered the bad news. Now let's talk about what you can actually do about this. Because you're not powerless here. The system is designed to trap you, but once you understand the trap, you can avoid it or escape it. First, let's talk about personal strategies if you're currently stuck in minimum payment debt. Strategy 1. Pay more than the minimum. I know that sounds obvious, but let me be specific. Even an extra $25 or $50 per month makes a massive difference. Remember those examples we showed? $75 extra per month cut decades off your payment timeline and saved thousands in interest. If you can't afford to pay much extra, focus on this. Target one card at a time. Keep paying minimums on all your cards to avoid late fees, but put every extra dollar toward the card with the highest interest rate. Once that's paid off, roll that payment into the next highest rate card. This is called the avalanche method, and it's mathematically optimal. Strategy 2. Call your credit card company and negotiate a lower interest rate. This works more often than you'd think. Banks have retention departments whose job is to keep customers. If you have decent payment history, call and say, "I'm considering transferring my balance to a competitor with a lower rate. Can you match it?" Many times, they'll lower your rate by 3 to 5 percentage points just to keep your business. Even a 5-point reduction on a $7,000 balance saves you over $2,500 in interest over the life of the debt. Strategy 3. Consider a balance transfer to a 0% APR promotional card. Many cards offer 12 to 18 months of 0% interest on transfers. Yes, there's usually a 3 to 5% transfer fee, but if you use that zero interest window to aggressively pay down principal, you can save thousands. Warning: this only works if you don't rack up new debt on the old card. The trap is people transfer the balance, get relief, and then start using the original card again. Don't do that. Cut up the card if you have to. Strategy 4. If you're drowning in multiple cards, look into nonprofit credit counseling. Organizations accredited by the National Foundation for Credit Counseling can negotiate with your creditors on your behalf, often getting interest rates reduced and setting up structured payment plans. This isn't the same as debt settlement companies, which often damage your credit. Credit counseling is legitimate and can be a lifeline. Strategy 5. Automate payments above the minimum. Here's a psychological hack. Set up automatic payments for a specific dollar amount that's higher than your minimum, even if it's just $10 higher. Once it's automated, you won't see that money and you won't miss it. But over time, it adds up and accelerates your debt payoff significantly. Now, those are personal strategies, but honestly, personal responsibility alone can't fix a system that's designed at a structural level to trap people. We also need policy changes. So let me tell you what needs to happen at the regulatory and legislative level. Policy change 1. Mandate higher minimum payments. Congress could pass a law requiring minimum payments to be at least 5% of the balance, which would force quicker debt payoff and reduce total interest paid. Banks would lobby against this hard because it would cost them billions, but it would save consumers even more. Policy change 2. Cap credit card interest rates. Some states already do this for certain types of loans. A federal cap at, say, 15% would still allow banks to profit while reducing the devastating impact of 28% APRs that some cards charge. Policy change 3. Require prominent disclosure of lifetime cost on statements. Right now, banks are required to show how long it'll take to pay off your balance at the minimum, but it's in tiny print. Make it a bold, prominent box at the top of every statement. If you pay only the minimum, you will pay X total over Y years. Make it impossible to miss. Here's everything we've covered. The trap. What you can do. What we need to change systematically. You now have the knowledge that banks don't want you to have. Look, I want to be realistic with you. Escaping credit card debt is hard. If it were easy, 45 million households wouldn't be trapped in it. The system is designed to keep you in debt, and breaking out requires either earning more money, spending less, or some combination of both. There's no magic solution. But knowledge is power. Now you know that minimum payments aren't friendly suggestions from your bank. They're mathematically optimized traps. You know that every month you pay only the minimum is another month the bank is extracting maximum profit from you. You know that the system is rigged, but it's not unbeatable. The most important thing you can do is break the anchor. Stop thinking of the minimum payment as your target. It's not. It's the floor, not the ceiling. Every dollar you pay above that minimum is a dollar that goes toward your freedom instead of toward bank profits. And if you can't pay more right now because you're genuinely struggling financially, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up. This isn't about personal failure. It's about surviving a system that's designed to extract wealth from you. Do what you need to do to survive, but understand the game being played so that when you can make different choices, you will. So now you know how banks make $180 billion from minimum payments. It's not through magic or luck. It's through deliberately designed systems that exploit human psychology and keep people in debt for decades while appearing reasonable and helpful. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to keep paying the minimum? Or are you going to fight back? Are you going to share this video with someone who needs to hear it? Are you going to push for policy changes that could fix this broken system? Let me know in the comments what your experience has been with credit card debt. Have you been trapped in the minimum payment cycle? Did you manage to break free? What strategies worked for you? I read the comments and your stories matter. If you found this valuable, hit that like button. It tells YouTube to show this to more people who need this information. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into financial systems that are designed to extract your wealth. And check out my video on how banks profit from overdraft fees. It's another $80 billion industry that works the same way. Thanks for watching. Stay informed, stay empowered. And remember, the system is designed to trap you, but now you see the trap. And that changes everything.